Welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce Greg Dunne, and he has an astounding story regarding his encounter with God. And I related it to two other events in history. One was the conversion of Bruno Cornicciola and Tre Fontane by our Blessed Mother, and also St. Paul in Scripture. It is that important of a story. And I would probably be downplaying it by calling it a conversion story. It's more of an encounter, and some would even say a spiritual resurrection. And with that, welcome, Greg.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
I'd like to begin with the sign of the cross, as we always do. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
So, Greg, please begin as you would like to do.
Right. Thanks very much, Bob. And it's a pleasure to meet you again and give my testimony. You've introduced me well, better than I could have done myself at times. You're definitely right in saying that it's not a conversion. It's a huge encounter with the Lord himself. I would imagine, knowing what I know now, the reason why he did it, I wouldn't have known at the time, except for it came through a channel of forgiveness to start it all off with. But what I know now from the Lord, from living in the encounter, which is living in the divine will and what he did to me, I can understand now why he did what he did. And all it would be obviously for his own glory, for him to tell the world that he can do anything he likes to anybody he wants to, regardless of color, creed, religion, or whatever. It's all about the human will coming back into the divine will anyway. And this is one of the reasons why he did it, to prove the point that all of us after Picaretta anyway, God brings us into this union and brings us into surrendering your will totally to the will of God and living in that structure. And living in the standard that he has set from all eternity for every human being to live in. It's only him that can bring us to that final piece of the jigsaw where we are in union with God and our will is rejoined back to him as it was in the beginning. That's why he done it real quick to me. I would imagine, I know that now. Because the speed of the way he did it with me, I don't think, as far as I know, because we have searched, I don't think there's anybody out there who's had the Lord encounter them into the divine will in the speed of what he did with me. It does take a little bit of explaining, but when you get to the actual encounter itself, it takes no more than, I'd say 15, 20 minutes. But I do say jokingly, like half of that was he's trying to calm me down in realizing what's going on. But the actual then resurrection, as you say, rightly explained, it is an actual resurrection and an actual rebirth back into the divine will from the Lord himself, where I was only coming across it the other day in the volumes of Picaretta. It's in volume 36, what happened to me. That you will hear from the encounter, the other two people that I lived with in this house that it happened in, were both pagans, if you will, and they wouldn't have known scripture. They wouldn't have had a walk with the Lord at all. They weren't even going to mass or anything like that. And one of them people is going to quote three huge statements that only God could say somehow through this one individual, where the only way I can describe it is that obviously the Lord must have seen something in that person's free will in order to be able to emanate these three profound statements that person said. One of them was in conjunction with what I'm talking about that I found in the Picaretta writing in volume 36. And it is about God leaving heaven to possess a soul in this mystical marriage. and bring them into union with God here on the earth. Not just the eternity level, actually here on the earth. And this person would actually tell me this in not so many words, who was a pagan, didn't know anything about scripture, and wasn't even there when the event went down. And the Lord would get this person to reveal that. And I mean, as I do say, it's only the Lord can pull that stunt to do something like that, of that magnitude, which he did. So that's always a fascinating part of my encounter with the Lord when I point that out. So I'll just take it from a quick synopsis of my entire life, because this encounter is going to start with the forgiveness of a huge forgiving act from myself to this individual, who would happen to be my father. Now, even though the Lord had all this from all eternity anyway, he just needed me to walk a little bit of history out in order for him to bring this to full fruition, which he did in 1998 in November, in this house, in the depths of winter, on the Sabbath day, on a Sunday, he was so precise, the Lord. It was just amazing. So with that, I'll just give you a quick version of my upbringing. I know I've done this testimony many times out there on YouTube, but I've done it in different ways, all meaning the same thing. But I'll just give a quick synopsis of my childhood. So I would have been born into a family of three brothers. My three brothers were much older than me. One was 14, 16 and 17 years older than me. I couldn't understand growing up where everybody had gone. Suddenly my three brothers were disappeared by the time I was growing up, I realised then that two of them got married very early in life, and one of my brothers then went to London, England, for must have been 55 years, and he never came back. But he did come back and forth on holidays and that, but he just disappeared, lived over there, and that was it. We all grew up in this house that had all the problems in it, from my father, who had a huge alcohol problem, but then was very, very, very vicious and violent in it, more so to the point that I would say, in the end, my father didn't really need alcohol to be vicious. He became vicious, and and me and my mum bore the blunt of that for many a year. And I endured much more than what my three brothers would have endured. Now, my three brothers are already gone to the Lord. My mum and dad are gone to the Lord. And the Lord has assured me he got them, which is a miracle. From my last brother and my father alone are a miracle that the Lord would get them. So much so that I do have this joke with the Lord about my last brother that went to heaven. I just say, I can imagine, because my brother was a self-confessed pagan, had never went to church, never done anything like that, never even dreamed of opening the Bible at all, anything at all like that. And still the Lord used him, would you believe, to give me my confirmation name. Imagine that. My pagan brother one day came out of the kitchen and said to me, "I have a great name for your confirmation name." And I just went, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, Emmanuel." Imagine that. And this is from someone who didn't even believe in God, that he could come out with that name. And I just looked at him and I said to him, "And what does that mean?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "It's something got to do with God," something like that, And I went, "Yeah, okay," and just accepted that, like as if it was normal. And so that's what my name is, Emmanuel. So my full title name is Gregory Paul Emmanuel. It's just amazing. The three biblical scenes in my name, And so my dad, I grew up with that violence from a very, very early age. I witnessed my mum go through horrendous beatings and horrendous poverty, and she would witness the same with me. And my life just carried on like that. And I just thought, it was never going to change, that was it. In the middle of it all, I was trying to go to school and try to learn some sort of an education, and it wasn't happening at all. I was failing everything miserably because I couldn't retain anything in the midst of all this horrendous abuse going on. The school did pick up on, I was a bit problematic, but they didn't really go into it. I mean, the best thing, in my mind, the best thing that they done, and the only way that they could deal with it, was that they expelled me from school. And I thought that was great. That's what I always wanted anyway. And in a strange way, in a mysterious way, that's exactly where the Lord wanted it to go, to prove this point, that to be in union with the Lord, it does not take the PhD. It takes the surrender of the will. That's what it takes. When you don't need education to do that, you just need to have this openness to God, and He'll do the rest, and He'll bring you in, which he is going to do in my story when you hear it, but I'm not aware of it, obviously. I just tell people now when I'm talking about the divine will that the Lord didn't just draw you through your prayer life or your devotion or your prayer group or anything like that. He's drawn you from the moment you came out of your mother's womb. He's been after you to get back into the divine will from then. So He's been using all your life to draw you to Him. And you realize that when you come into the divine will, and He makes you aware that your actual desire to be with God in the relationship with Him that He has given you from the beginning, He has drawn that desire to Himself from His own actual desire. So by the time you come into the divine will, then you quickly realize this is both desires meeting, and you end up having the one desire. You desire what God wants, and He will give you your heart's desire, which is what He wants. And He will immerse you then into Himself eventually. And that's the union. Now, he did that to me in 20 seconds, which is just remarkable. You will hear how that encounter unfolded, but it did take 20 seconds. Now, there is a good couple of minutes before that where the Lord's trying to calm me down and grab my attention, because I'm just running all over the place, not realizing what's going on. And you've often heard that terminology, the hound of heaven. The Lord, he didn't give up. He didn't say, here, I'm not chasing this fella around the house, I'm going. He kept it up, until he finally done the encounter, which is remarkable. Now, as I didn't know in the divine will now, the Lord is after everybody like that, and He will encounter everybody like that on this earth, as it is in heaven. He's already done it in heaven. He's now going to do it here on the earth. It's time to do it to its fullness. We all know, anybody who's studying the divine will knows that Picaretta was chosen to open the door to that. And when the Lord initiated this woman into opening up the divine will, and you go through that door, she ends up not being the model. The model is Mary. Mary is the model because she's the one who never lived outside of the divine will for 1 second. So as soon as you go through Picaretta, you see Mary, and Mary's going to bring it to Nazareth then to show you how to live in the divine will, which is everything that she was doing. Every act that she done was in the divine will, so you follow suit. That's the way it is. And that's the way the relationship was from the beginning. And it's going back to that. I remember the Lord giving me this 2 sentences to sum up the whole thing. And the 2 sentences were, everything finds its completion in its origin. And we're no different. So we find our completion in our origin, which is in God. We come out from Him and we'll go back to Him. But by the time He gets us back into Him, we will be flawless. That's the whole idea. Perfection will be achieved this side of eternity, because the Lord promised that. Otherwise, He wouldn't have said it in the scripture, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Otherwise, that scripture made no sense. So this is either achievable or it's not. It's just a theory, or it's achievable. And if it's a theory, then there's no really incentive. It's like every other theory. Well, the fact is that it's not. And he has blown that theory out of the water because he's just produced one in myself, who has been rebirthed from himself straight into his divine will and purged on the spot. It started with an act of forgiveness, and the Lord took over and brought it to another level. And by the time then I met the famous Frances Hogan, she had known what happened. I know I'm jumping the gun, but there you go. I mean, after the encounter, I was 20 years off with the Lord in the wilderness, as Hosea would say. You know, it's Hosea 2, 16 to 21. I've lured you out there into the wilderness to speak to your heart. Yeah, and I will betroth you to myself. Yeah, and you will know God. Well, that's the reason why he brings you out there. So in my encounter, the reason why he brought me out there was that, you know, the Lord is the great mathematician here. He loves to balance things out. You know, we went out for 40 days out to the desert for the 40-year wilderness roaming. Well, he done the same here with the 20 seconds. So it took 20 seconds for the Lord to rebirth me. And I lived for 20 years out there in the wilderness in what he had done in 20 seconds. So I was actually living what he did, in experiencing, living in the divine will all the time. And then bang on 20 years, he sent me to Frances Hogan. Now, I didn't know who she was. Before I went to Frances, he got me to meet 5 priests. Now, that was the Lord connecting it back to the Catholic Church in these 5 men. That was his first port of call with me. I mean, through my upbringing and everything, and my dysfunction through life and unlearned position in school, I had departed from the church, but not abandoned it. You know, I was baptized. I made my communion. I made my confirmation. I went through the confession and all as a child and all that, all the sacraments, fine. But then when I was touching 16, I just went, that's the end of that now. Good luck. And went out into the world. So I didn't really consciously abandon the church. I just went off and sort of never frequented the place ever again until the actual encounter. It was only, I think it was about 2 or 3 days after the encounter, the Lord brought me back around to the Catholic Church. And this is the remarkable thing about it, that the way the Lord re-represented me back into the church, and Mary, by the way, because I had no relationship with the Lord. I had no relationship with Mary. I wouldn't have known anything about Mary to the degree of where the rosary or, devotions to Mary or devotions to this. You know, I always used to say after the encounter jokingly, I was still a Catholic, but don't ask me to spell it. You know, that's about the strength of my Catholicism, you know. I had it in name, you know. Well, the Lord was going to prove the point here that this is connected to his church here, this divine will and being rebirthed into it. He brought me around one day to the Catholic Church. He told me that he wanted me to go into the church for a couple of minutes, and I didn't know what he was up to at the time, and I just obeyed and I walked into the church, and he just said to me so eloquently, "This is my church." And I just looked at him and I said, "Obviously, like how could it not be? You know, that way." And that was my reintroduction to the church, to Mass. And I realized then that I said to the Lord, once you bring somebody into relationship with you at this level, you will understand the Mass and you will understand the church, and you will not be have any problem with that. You will literally understand what's going on the altar from the actual encounter with the Lord in relationship. So he taught me that day that once we are in relationship with him, we will understand it all, everything, even another human being, to the way that the Lord wants you to understand on his level. You have that relationship with him and his divine will, and everything will be balanced in life to see it his way. And then eventually then love his way. You know, me growing up, I can safely say that my father never loved me at all. I don't know whether the man ever tried or not. When I was younger than that, I can't remember. It just that was it. He just didn't. He obviously couldn't. But I mean, I didn't know that then. I know that now in all the hindsights after it. But so I never really loved him back either. So there was a huge loss there. And the only one who was winning that battle, if you will, for the moment, would have been the enemy, because he would have had a split between a father and a son for the majority of my life, and the majority of his own life. So we both really lost out on a father figure and a son figure. And then my mum, in the middle of all that, was trying to keep that all going and keep it together, and that's why I do always say my mum's a saint. If she wasn't going to be a saint in heaven, she certainly was nearly one here, in her endurance test and everything. And she obviously had her own walk with the Lord that I probably didn't know about. And it's the great Augustine's mother, isn't it? Monica, all them tears and all them prayers, eventually did something to her son, and the Lord would would eloquently give me that statement there to be factual, because the Lord Himself told me after the encounter that He did not want me to tell my mum about the encounter. He wanted to. He wanted to do that personally, and He did. He did it on my mum's deathbed. I was there the day she passed, and He actually did do it. I do call it, He gave my mum the cherry on the cake. For all the suffering and all the tears that she did, he paid her back hugely on her deathbed. She knew exactly what happened to me. I didn't tell her, and He did. I was obedient to the Lord's order there that time when He said, "Don't tell your mum." I didn't, and there was a good few years passed before my mum passed after my encounter. And I didn't tell her. Now, as mothers go, she wasn't stupid. She knew something happened, because I was totally transformed and totally changed. I used to go down and visit my mum, and at one time the old Greg, let's say, would have just sat there and said nothing, and would have been in the height of pain and whatever, and she would have seen that, as opposed to now. Somebody who was nearly looking like Moses on the chair beside her, after the encounter. She knew obviously something had happened, and the bad health and everything that I was in wasn't there suddenly. The remarkable thing about the Lord took away every single thing that was wrong in my life, not only wrong in the abuse in my childhood and all that. He actually restored. He restored me back to when I came out of him, to be in the beginning. As He says, flawless, perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Only achievable by the Lord bringing you into His divine will. That's the only way you will get to perfection. On this earth, you won't get it other than the Lord doing it. And obviously that's what my mum was looking at. She couldn't understand it. She never really went there with it, because anyway, the Lord had blocked it off that I wasn't going to tell her. He was going to do that, which He did. So just to get back to at the end of the childhood thing, where I can get into the actual encounter. So me and my poor father, we never talked. He never told me he loved me. I never told him that either. And we never communicated at all. The only thing I ever heard of my dad was vicious, violent language and beatings every day of the week, and I would see my mum being beaten to a pulp, as they call it. And my mum did try to leave this man, but she really couldn't, because in them days it was really the late 70s. Very late 70s, where there was nothing around what there are for women now. If they were to go through all that scene now, they could be helped, places to go, people to talk to and all that. Well, in that age, there wasn't that. There was just family members or whatever, and that would only last for a while anyway, going around family members. You still had to go back in to that cycle, you know. And but there you go. That was all an endurance test. I personally believe, I always say, no matter where I'm giving my testimony, Bob, I always like to end on the abuse level, where I do always say two significant things to a person's cut off in life, you know. And I personally believe it's when you're asked to do this thing and when you're told this particular thing. I personally believe it from my own abusive background, you know. And one of them was, I was asked as a child to go into the bedroom of that marital bed to protect my mum in a daily basis, especially at night, because my father was so violent, you know. And so I remember a single bed being put into that room up against the wall, and my mum and dad were in the double bed. And all I can say to you is that I heard and seen what a child shouldn't hear and see in the dark in that bed. And I leave that to your imagination. I won't go hugely into that. People should know what I'm talking about. But just to add to that, just to tell you the amount of violence and viciousness, you know. In that bedroom, my dad would, on his way out to go to the toilet, okay, he would have to pass the bed that I was sleeping in. So he would get up in the dark and he would pass by that bed to go out to the toilet, and he would actually give me a beating in that bed in the dark. And then when he went out into the toilet and came back, he would have to repass the bed and he would give me another beating on the way back in the dark, and get into that marital bed as if nothing happened. And my mum would just freeze in that bed. I could literally hear her freeze in the bed with the fear and the terror. And that went on for yonks. So that was number one. I had tuned off in life just on that alone. And then number two is when this particular thing is said to an individual in the height of abuse, you really retreat and you really click off, as I call it in life. And this is exactly what happened. So my dad looked at me one day with what I would call only a vicious look at one time. And he had his eyes to the floor. And for some reason, my attention was grabbed and I looked over at him. And then he slowly lifted his eyes up off the floor, and he looked at me straight in the eyes with this savage look. And he said to me, "You were never wanted." And he said it to me in such venom that I believed that to be true. And that went in as what I call to my belief system. And I tuned off from life. And I retreated, and I didn't really want to know anybody. I said then, okay, I will never be hurt but like that again, ever again. And that's the detrimental death sentence that you give yourself, because you will literally retreat from life. You don't really want to partake in life at all. You'll just go through the motions of life. And that's the way I did. Along with that then, just to leave it on that note, I did become anorexic. I was about, now I know I'm talking to probably an American audience as well. I have to get the mathematics correct, you know. The weight I'm trying to get. So I was what they call in Ireland, I was 5 stone. Now, whatever 5 stone is in pounds to the Americans, 70 pound. I've just been told by my team member there, 70 pound. So that's exactly what I was, which is equivalent to 5 stone in our weight in Ireland. So that was my weight. And I was vomiting blood and vomiting poison every day of the week along with that. So the remarkable thing about it was that I never seen a doctor at all out through my life. And the Lord decided to heal that in the encounter in the blink of an eye, which he did. So when you hear my encounter, which I'm going to get into now, you will hear such an extraordinary level of pain that I went through in life. And the Lord, if you will, let that go down in life, more than likely to prove a point here that God was going to let this individual, which would be me, go down to the lowest possible position that one could be, even in unlearnedship. Because when I was expelled from school, Bob, I actually left with no credentials whatsoever. I could just barely read and write. I never passed an exam in my life, and left that way. Totally unlearned. That it was just laughable that the Lord would pick somebody like that, and do what he did. After the encounter, when I did meet the 5 priests, the last priest that I met before I met Francis Hogan was the actual top Jesuit in the entire country of Ireland in mysticism. And he had PhDs, as I do say. You could smell the intelligence of this man when he walked into the room. He was that intelligent, And I do say he had PhDs the length of his arm. He was that intelligent, And here I was in a pair of plimsolls and a pair of jeans and a short saying, how is it going? And getting ready to talk about Melchizedek and everything else in the Bible and mystical encounters, and tell him that I'd read all the mystics, I'd read all the early church fathers and all that. And he just said to me, as a matter of interest, he said, you didn't happen to read Augustine's Confessions, did you? And I said to him, oh, I did, yeah. And he said to me, and how did you get on with that? And I said, yeah, okay. Yeah, not bad. Yeah, it's all right. And he howled laughing, at that statement. But that was true. People then ask the question who don't understand the divine will, let's say. They would have just heard me saying I'd no education. I left school, could just barely read and write. Well, as we all know, in the divine will, when you're living in the divine will, you're fusing in God, and you're obviously asking him to come into the acts that you're doing. So therefore, come write in me so I may write in you, Lord. Come read in me so that I may read in you. There's the Lord going to be in that act. Well, that's how I was able to read all the mystics and read all the early church fathers, because he was doing the act in me and producing what I was to read. And the way I would describe it then to that Jesuit priest and Francis herself when I met her is that I said that all this was familiar language. It was just familiar language. It all made perfect sense. And as the Jesuit pointed out, and there was another 2 priests there that of them 5 that had PhDs in mysticism as well. And they agreed that one with the unlearned position that I was in life, I could not understand any of them mystics or the early church fathers. It was just impossible. How could you? Unless something divine had happened. And that's exactly what did happen. And they knew it, So the Lord handpicked the priests. I didn't know any priests at all. And he produced 5 of them after the encounter over a period of time. I met them all individually. Most of the 5 didn't know one another. 2 of them did. The others didn't really. And they all agreed individually that, the Lord had left heaven here to do this unique thing. Now, whether they knew about the divine will or anything like that, it didn't really matter at the time. What these men knew was that this was extraordinary, and this wasn't just an ordinary thing, and it most certainly wasn't a conversion, because not to this profound movement by God, this wouldn't come under the category of a conversion. So much so that these men actually said to me, their words, not mine, these men actually said to me when they met me, they said, congratulations, we can't really do anything for you. What could we do? And I said, well, I didn't really come to you to do anything. I just came to you to tell you what happened, And they laughed, and they said, oh, no problem. You can come and meet us all the time, and we'll have a talk. about, whatever mysticism and all that and scripture and that. We'll see you in mass and that. But other than that, they said, wait, what could we do, and they used to laugh at that, and I met them on a regular basis, before the Lord shifted me from there to meet Francis then, But one of them priests, besides being the Jesuit priest, he was an actual theologian. And he actually said to me, in his own words, he said he was 40 years a priest. Now, he's since deceased, because he was an elderly man when I met him. He was in his 80s when I met him, And but he said to me, I'm 40 years a priest. And I said to him, oh, very nice, And he said to me, well, he said, if that's the way you want to put it. But he said, I'm trying to get where you are. And he said, and I'm not even across the street. He said, in 40 years, And he said, it's just remarkable. And he said to me, I'm actually a theologian. And he said to me, it took me 14 years of that 40 to actually be a theologian. And he said to me, and you walk in here and got it after 14 minutes. He said, it's just extraordinary. He said, what the Lord has done here. He said, your understanding is just second to none, Now, these are all their words, not mine, And that's the way it was going with the priests. And then I met Francis. But before I offload into Francis, then I'll tell you then about the actual encounter. So I left school. My dad passed away in the end. He did get, as I do say, the mysteries of God and his mystical ways of doing things and his permissive will and everything are just enormous and just, spectacular at times, And the reason why I'm saying that is that when it comes to my dad's passing, like me and my dad never spoke at all. And the only thing that I ever heard out of my father's mouth towards me and my mum was just venom and poisons, And in the end of the latter end of my dad's life, he actually got esophagus cancer, and he actually couldn't talk in the latter ends of his life, And I'd always say that to just to put it out there that the mysteries of God, his ways of doing things and allowing certain things. That's what happened. And that's how my dad passed away. He passed from esophagus cancer. He had an operation for it, but it never really done anything, and he passed away. And of course, unfortunately, he passed away with both of us resenting one another, which is where the Lord does say, very dangerous position to be in. That's why the Lord does say about don't let the sun go down in your anger. You don't have tomorrow. I determine that, he says, And if I'm asking you to do something, rectify something, or have me do something in all them areas today, I mean today. You may not have tomorrow. That's what he's talking about, Well, I took that, unfortunately, to the extreme, where I, in my ignorance now, I did take that resentment to the grave, where you're really not supposed to be taking these things, because it's a bit more difficult now to be sorting it at that stage. So that's where I actually did take it. So in the end, then I still dreadfully hated my dad when he passed. Now, and then my dad's gone into eternity with the same hatred, which is more tragic as well. Now, I didn't know all that then. I mean, I know it now from the union with the Lord, when he told me about it all, how it all works, how the supernatural works and his realm works and that, and to get into his kingdom of the divine will. My dad eventually, in order to enter the kingdom, would have to have love completely dominating his whole nature, as it was in the beginning. That's how he was going to enter the kingdom. He obviously would have to go to purgatory. Now, on that note, Bob, I literally thought that my father was going to hell. Isn't that amazing? I literally thought that because of what I was enduring off the man. To me, I always thought he was possessed. I actually said that I wouldn't have really known what I was even talking about at that level. It was just stuff flying out of my mouth. And but I did literally tell him before he died that he was going to go to hell. And I actually said to him, I'm actually going to help you get there. Now I said, I've no idea how I'm going to do that, but that's what I'm going to do. Now that's just, it's just whatever coming out of your mouth. That's not going to happen. But I literally thought it could happen, and that he was going to go there. Now I was going to get a big wake up call from the Lord in this encounter when I realized, no, I got that wrong, and the Lord would show me there then that God's mercy is infallible, and it is totally not what we think. It's major. The depths of mercy from God is just astronomical, of what he will go to save a soul. Absolutely. Even on the other side of eternity, he's still at saving a soul. The Lord's not in the business of damning anybody. He's in the business of saving all the time. As we know in the divine will, love will save the day. The only thing that will save the day, because the only thing that's going to get you into the kingdom is love anyway. It's all driven by love, but it has to be God's love, God's way, his agape love that gets you into the entrance of the kingdom. Well, I'm going to find out in the most dramatic way that I got that wrong about my father. His little journey to hell was diverted. I would get a big wake up call on that alone, Bob. So just to launch into it then. So my father passed away. I was going through life in a horrendous state. I had all this resentment and bitterness towards my dad. I thought it was all normal. I was doing what I was doing in the world. Wasn't frequenting the church or the sacraments or anything like that. Didn't realise you could have a relationship with the Lord at all. Didn't know anything about Mary. Didn't realise that, she was your mother or anything at all of that nature until after the encounter, So I'm going through life like that. And suddenly then the Lord starts to use people. And as I'd always say, always God's timing. Everybody has their moment with God. And God picks the moment all the time. And here's going to be my moment with God. So he sends this woman along. She was a married woman. And he sends her along to get this woman to do one thing. This woman was going to try and get me, who, I never really knew starting off with, was to get me to my father's grave, to actually forgive him. That's obviously the mandate this woman had from heaven somehow. To me, it didn't look that way. She was just an annoying woman that kept saying to me, I need to forgive, and I kept ignoring her, just blanking her. Every time she mentioned I needed to forgive my father, it was like a red rag to a bull, and I didn't really want to go there with that. That's just the short version of that, Bob. Because if it was to go hugely into that, we'd be here for a week. The short version of this woman is that heaven pushed this woman to bring this thing to fruition, to get me to that graveside. I met this woman along the way, and we got talking. To cut the long story short, she got talking about what she could see in me, that I had this resentment and bitterness towards my dad. I needed to forgive him. I wouldn't hear tell of that at all. My wrong interpretation of forgiving my dad would be I would be condoning what he did. And that's the wrong interpretation of forgiving somebody. You actually think that you're condoning the act of the wrong. And now that would be the play of the enemy. He's trying to convince you of that, so as you will keep the resentment going, and trying to blindside you all the time with that lie. It's only when the Lord comes in to do something that you realize, no, the actual freedom is in the forgiveness for yourself and the individual, regardless of whether they're alive or dead. Now, in my case, it would be my father was gone to eternity here, and I couldn't do anything about that on the face of the earth, except for this woman knew, no, you need to forgive him. And I just had a huge block to that every time. But then here's the moment with the Lord then, not knowing obviously this is God. One day when this woman said, after tons of times telling me that I needed to forgive my father, I heard her different. Suddenly that rang different in my ear. Of all the times she has said it to me, this particular day, I entertained that thought, probably for about 10 seconds, and went, that has a different ring to it today for some reason. And then I just dismissed it. And then she said to me, well, she said, that being the case, she said, this is what you need to do. And she said, if you ever decide to do that, she said to me, you are going to have to go to his graveside. You won't be able to do this from afar. For some reason, she said, I needed to go to the grave. And that's when I tuned off again. I said, no, that will never happen. I couldn't bring myself to that at all. 16 years had passed anyway. I probably didn't even know what part of the graveyard he would even be in, you know? So I just dismissed it altogether. And then walked around for a little while and then re-entertained that thought again. And for some reason said, you know what? I'm actually going to give that a shot. Now, when Francis Hogan is the one who has my complete testimony, the priest had certain levels of it, and they all agreed that, this was God moving. He was working. He was pushing you towards that, even though you didn't know what was happening. He was guiding this woman to push me in that direction, and this was the moment that I entertained the thought and decided to do that, but not knowing the outcome, not knowing anything what would happen. When I did tell Frances my testimony, she did say to me, well, the remarkable thing about that was that when I did eventually stand at my dad's graveside to actually forgive him, I was gone beyond the pale of pain. I describe myself as I was numb with the pain in life. And I was 37 years of age at that time. And I was gone beyond what I call the pale of pain. I was just numb with the pain. I mean, I woke up every day, that condition. And there just seemed to be no end to it. And I remember Francis saying to me, and I agreed with her, that I came to this level of pain that I knew then if I stood at that graveside and this was the only thing left to do, and if somebody had said to me, Bob, you know, Greg, if you did do this act, something bad's going to happen to you, or someone's going to kill you or something, I was willing to say, so be it. I don't care. I've come to the end of this magnitude of pain, so why not? What else can I endure, you know? And that's the condition I stood at that grave. So I did go on a Saturday in November in 1998 to that graveside. I was living with two other people, and it was 16 years had passed in my dad's passing. I had no idea where he was buried. I knew the cemetery that he was in. I went up to the cemetery, and by the way, another thing where is a strange thing in life, if you want to call it that, the Lord allows people into one's life for a short period of time, and then He lets them exit that life for whatever reason, you know. And it seemed to be that this woman will fall into that category. So He allowed this woman to come in, get me, if you will, to the graveside, and then disappear. Because after I had done the encounter, I found out where she lived, told her what happened, and we never met again. Never. And I've never had any inkling to find her or vice versa. And they're just the mysteries of life with the Lord. You know, that he allowed this woman in just for that one deed, you know. And that's the way it played out with her. So she got me there. She did say to me that I would have to go to the graveside, and I couldn't do it any other way. I agreed to that, so, and I went up to the grave. I went up to the graveyard, went up to the office, found out where the grave was, went on a journey up to try and find a grave, and I couldn't find it, which was remarkable at the time. I remember going past all graves, knowing where the guy had told me to go. Like, for the life of me, I couldn't find where he was talking about. I found the section of graves he was talking about, but I couldn't find the actual grave. And then I entertained a thought where I said, do you know, I think this is a bad idea. I think I'll go. I don't think I'll ever find this grave, you know. Now, what I didn't know then, what I know now, that would be the enemy would have been very happy with that outcome. You know, he was sort of like contributing to that mindset of, yeah, go, it's a bad idea. You'll never find it. And this is all a waste of time, you know. And I was nearly going to go. And then I stopped in my tracks and I said, oh, I can remember now 16 years ago, my mom's sister put a cross on the grave of the morning of the funeral. So I said, I'll go and have a look around for that. Now, I was looking around for crosses and that, and I couldn't find any crosses with my dad's name on it. I didn't really know what the year was or the month was that he died, but I did have a name and an address for the office. That's how he told me the area that he was buried in. But I couldn't find this cross. And I turned around again for the second time to leave that cemetery. Now, I know here's the light and the dark. So I know now, obviously, the enemy did not want me to find that grave. And God had another plan, because when I turned around to go, out of the corner of my eye, a cross grabbed my attention, sticking out of the ground. And when I looked over and seen the cross, now I had no relationship with God going on. I had no prayer life at all, anything. I didn't even know how to say formal prayers, Bob. So I couldn't even exclaim, oh, good Lord, you know, would you look at that? You know, how did that happen? I couldn't exclaim anything like that. So I just said, I don't believe you, I said to myself. I was talking to myself. I said, I don't believe that could be the cross now. Now, what are the chances of that? I said. And then I said to myself, well, at least go over and have a look, you know. So I went over to this piece of grass patch, and I looked at the cross, and just about barely sticking out of the ground, there was the cross and his name and the month and the year that he was buried. And it was just barely sticking out of the ground to read that. And I said, wow, imagine that now. After 16 years, that was just barely sticking out of the ground. It had sunk so much in over 16 years that it was still made out his name on it. And, you know, as I would have said then, you know, who could only pull that stunt? You know, only the Lord, you know. And I say now, give that another few weeks or a few months. That may have disappeared into the grave completely, Bob, and I would have never found it. You know? So these are all the movements of the Lord that you don't recognize then, obviously, but you do now, you know? So I went over, there was the grave, and then I said, okay, this is great. Now, what do I do? What does this forgiveness thing now mean? This woman never told me. Oh, by the way, the Lord does love the drama, Bob. He loves all the epics and that, you know. I still continue to say to him, you love the epics, Lord, and you love the drama because you get to show off and show the impossible of what you can do. And you just smile away at that, you know, in agreement. And the reason why I say that is because this woman's name You know, it couldn't just be an ordinary name. It couldn't be Anne or Jane or Lucy or something like that. No, it had to be the big biblical name that this woman had, Rachel. You know, that was her name, Rachel. See? And she was the one that got me to the grave. So there I am at the graveside, and I said, well, now this is great. I said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I said, Rachel never told me what to say or what to do. So what am I going to do? What does that mean? Forgive. What do I say? I don't know any form of prayer, so what am I going to do? So, as I do say, to Francis Hogan, still to this day, and every now and again, I say, Francis, remember the day I stood at that graveside to forgive my father? And she says, yeah. I said, weren't they exceptional words that came out of my mouth that day? Where did they come from? And she said to me, they came from the depths of a crushed spirit. She said, that's where they came from, Greg. And she said, nobody else prompted you, only God's way of doing things, to bring these words from the depths of your soul out so as they could be heard. Okay? So what happened was, I stood at the graveside and I said, okay, here goes. So I knelt down on one knee and I put my left hand on the actual grave, which would be a significant poignant point after. I didn't realise what I was doing then. I do now. But my left hand went on the actual grave, and these were the words that I said. And I said, I forgive you for what you did. I don't condone what you did, but I can understand why you did it. And I hope that you can forgive me and understand why I did what I did. And then I took my hand up off the grave, stood up, and stood back about 2 or 3 feet. And I said, wow, imagine that's all that took. And I said, for a moment in time, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders for the very first time in life. I was always burdened with life. I always walked this drudging road, dread road, you know, and I just felt burdened all the time and in the height of pain and emotional turmoil. And for a moment in time, I didn't feel that. And I said, wow. Well, I said, if that's all that this is going to entail, and if that's all I get out of this actual act, it was worth it. It was just worth it to feel that at that moment in time, where I never had peace at all or quiet in my life. And I said, that'll do. That's fine. That's it. I'll go home. That's it, done and dusted now. That's it. And I walked away. And I'd always say at this part of the testimony, and God would have said, I'll see you tomorrow, Greg. It's not over. See? So that was on a Saturday. I went home. I knocked at Rachel's house and I told her what I did. I said that I'd forgiven my father. She said, really? I said, yes. She said, did you go to the grave to do that? And I said, I did. And she said, wow. Well, she said, you're going to receive the grace of God. Now, Bob, I had no idea what she was talking about. That went over my head completely. I didn't even know what she meant. And that was really an understatement of what that woman said in actually what was going to happen 24 hours later, you know? So that was on the Saturday. I never met her again. We parted. I went home, living with these 2 other individuals. And that was a Saturday. Woke up on the Sunday morning, on the Sabbath, as the Lord wanted it to be. And we decided, me and the other 2 people that were in our house, we decided what we were going to do that day. They said they were going off for a couple of few hours. And I was actually going to stay in and watch a soccer game. They call it football in Ireland. I think they call it soccer in America, you know. So I was actually going to watch a soccer game on the television, which I was familiar to do anyway. And so my reason for watching soccer, Bob, certainly wasn't for sport. It was actually for to vent and try and get rid of some anger, where I would scream and roar at the television if the team was losing or whatever, that was my sort of like semi little release of all the build up of stuff that I had going on in me. Now it never did any good or anything like that. You still had it when the game was over. It didn't make any odds. But the reason why I say that is because I was never to watch a soccer game again, ever, since 1998, or watch the television, because the reason why I was watching the soccer was gone. It was totally for anger related. And now that the anger was gone, there was no point me watching the soccer for sport. I never did, really. So it sort of like just dropped off. Now, after that, then in the walk with the Lord in the divine will, then he would tell me that I don't know, I'd like to say it this way. I've never, because I've never heard it out there anyway, except coming from my mouth from the Lord, that it looks like that I'm the only one out there that has got this revelation from the Lord about how he purges on this earth. And the way he does it is that he looks at the why behind the what. That's the way he does it. So it's not necessarily what you're doing. It's why you're doing it and why you can't stop doing it. That's where he goes for. And once he purges that why, the what of you are doing falls away. Well, I had evidence of that with the soccer game. So what I was doing was watching soccer with anger. And the reason why was because it was to release all these problems, which it didn't. So once the Lord purged why I was doing that, I would no longer do the what anymore. It wasn't important. See? It wasn't part of the relationship now in where one was with God. See? Yeah, simple. Yeah, when you have it done to you, it's simple, So I sit down and I turn on the television to watch the soccer game, and I'm the only one in the house. I'll just wet my lips there for a second, Bob. So I sit down, I turn on the television, on comes the soccer game, and I sit on the what's called a settee. I think do you understand what a settee means? Because I know the Americans had a problem with me saying couch or armchair or whatever, but it's settee. Do you know what a settee is?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, grand. So I sat down on the settee to watch the game. On it came, and I'm looking at the game, and I said to myself, "Oh, this is strange. I can't really hear the television, so there must be something wrong with the volume." So I had a remote in my hand, and I heard the television, the volume up, and sat back down. And I said, "No, that's strange. I still can't hear it correctly, And I heard it again, sat back down, and still couldn't hear it properly. I went back over, and I sort of like didn't gently slap the television on the side, okay, and thinking that was going to do something. Sat back down. No, didn't make any difference. And then, as a last resort, I put my finger on the remote control, hired it up to the highest it could go, and as I say, you could deafen the whole street with the volume of the TV, and for some reason I still couldn't hear it properly. And then I said to myself with a slight little bit of alarm, this is not the television, this is actually me, because I said I can't actually hear the street. I can't hear any traffic out on the road. And then I said with more alarm, I said, it's worse than that. I can't actually hear my voice. I can't even hear myself talking. So I was in panic mode, and I said I didn't know what was going on. So then, next of all, here comes the Lord, but I didn't obviously know at the time, right? So, in the blink of an eye, the whole atmosphere in this sitting room ceased. It just sort of like changed from one atmosphere to another. And I sensed that this atmosphere left the room, and then this one was filling up this room, inch by inch. The presence in it was so overwhelming that I didn't know what was happening. And I got a fright, and I got such a fright that I threw the remote control down the end of the sitting room, and I ran out the room, and I ran down the hall, and I ran into the kitchen. And I slammed the door that hard that I nearly took the door off the hinges with the shock and the fright. And I stood in the middle of the kitchen. Now remember, I'm on my own in the house. I stood in the middle in the kitchen, and I went, what was that? What happened there? What was this? And then I said, you must have done something, did you? What did you do? And then, because I was asking myself the question and answering it at the same time, and I said, no, I don't remember doing anything wrong. What's this? And then I stopped. And then the presence that happened in the sitting room exactly happened in the kitchen. So the atmosphere suddenly changed in the kitchen again, likewise in the sitting room. And it started to fill up the whole kitchen with this presence, every square inch of it. And I got terrified again, and I ran out the door. I ran down the hall. I looked up the stairs, and I said, that'll do. And I ran up the stairs and ran right along the landing into the last bedroom. And I slammed the door so hard I nearly took the hinges off the door. And I sat on the bed, and I couldn't even say, Bob, I couldn't even say, oh, good Lord, oh my God, what's going on here? Because I didn't have a relationship with the Lord. So the best I could come out with was, what was that? And what did you do? You must have done something. What is this happening to you? I was trying to make out what it was. Now, what I know now, what I didn't know then, the Lord is going to start to get himself recognized here on a slow basis, okay? So the next thing the Lord's going to do here is he's going to start doing maneuvers, as I call them, scripture-based, okay, which I didn't know then, but I know now. So from the atmosphere and the presence filling up 2 rooms downstairs, here I am in this 3rd bedroom. Now, there are 3 bedrooms along that landing, and there's a toilet. So there's 4 rooms to run into, and I ran into every one of them. Okay, but here I am in the last bedroom first, and what the Lord's going to do is going to change the dynamics of this chasing you around the place. Okay, to make himself noticed, scripturally based. Now, you know the Acts of the Apostles when they're in the upper room. And the Lord after the resurrection is going to appear here, and they're all hiding. The door bolted for fear of everything. And the Lord appears in that room. He appears so much that he didn't open the door. He goes through the door to appear into that room, in the upper room. Well, he's just going to do the same here now in this bedroom. So instead of him filling up the room in the normal way downstairs, he's going to come through the door. So this presence comes actually through the door and then starts to fill up the atmosphere in this room. And again, I was terrified. I ran out the door and I ran into the next bedroom. And I done that all the way along the landing. And the Lord came through them doors and made his presence felt in them rooms. And the last room I went into was the toilet. And I sat on the toilet pot and I put my head in my hands and I said, what is going on here? I have no idea. You must have done something wrong. Try and think, what did you do? And for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything wrong. And the presence, now I'm not knowing this is God yet, but I am knowing that wherever this presence is, it's so overwhelmingly holy that I have to keep running. I know that much. So, in comes this presence through the bathroom door. And I got up off the toilet pot and I ran out the door and I flew down the stairs. Now, I don't know whether anybody is familiar with the athletics and that. Well, you should be in America. You've one of the best teams around in the athletic game, right? So Usain Bolt, are you familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, when I would have broken his record, no problem, running down them stairs with the speed that I was going down there, with the fright and the shock of what was going on. And I ran down them stairs And I do always say in this part of the testimony, I can imagine all of heaven saying to the Lord, because they were all looking at it. They were all looking at this drama. So I can imagine all of heaven saying to the Lord, it's going to be interesting to see where he's going to run to next, because he's run into every room in the house. There isn't any left. And I can imagine the Lord saying back to them, yes, correct. And the only thing that he hasn't run into yet, he's actually running for it now, the patio door. That's where he's headed with the speed he's running down the stairs. So here comes the Lord then again with more scripture-based evidence of himself. So what he does on the stairs is he catches me with John 14:27. And I love quoting it because I'll quote it for the rest of my life because I'll never forget it. So John 14:27 is, peace I bequeath to you, my own peace I give you. A peace the world cannot give you. It's my free gift to you. And that's why he sedated with me on the stairs. So he stopped me in my tracks with that overwhelming peace. So much so that I actually could sense it seeping in to my skin and into my interior. My whole body was calm and in this peace mode. And I never had peace like that in my entire life. That's why the Lord calls it, it's not of the world. It's his own peace, his actual own peace that he's implanting in you. Now, I do say he did that to me, obviously as a gift from him, but it was to sedate me, if you will, to stop and running all over the place, because I would have been still running if he hadn't have done it properly, you know? So he had my attention, let's say. Now, I was just calm and stopped running. And I felt it seep in. So much so that I walked down, as calm as you like, down the stairs. I turned to the left and went back into the sitting room where it began, where the television was with the soccer game. And I walked back in there and I calmly just stood at a section in that room. Now, the Lord would up the ante again. He would up the notch. Okay. Now what he's going to do is he's going to make himself, his presence felt. I still wouldn't recognize it's God yet until he's going to give me 3 massive locutions. Now, I didn't know that word at the time. I know all these terminologies now, you know. But he is going to give me these 3 huge locutions. And it's on the 3rd locution that I will recognize that this is the Lord. Not until then. So I'm standing here in the sitting room in this peaceful mode that I never experienced in my entire life. Now, at this juncture then, even though I didn't know it was the Lord, I knew it wasn't evil and I knew it wasn't bad, because one would not have this amount of peace if this was anything bad. Now, I didn't know anything about the enemy or anything like that, but what I did know at that time, that this amount of peace could not be bad. It had to be good. So I recognized that from this peace. So I'm here and I'm going to be made aware by the Lord, his presence. Now, I don't know it's him, but I am aware in the blink of an eye that there is somebody standing beside me, and this somebody is going to allow something happen in this sitting room. And this, Bob, wouldn't even be the encounter yet. This was got to do with my father, which was off the Richter scale in mercy what God would do here, and his love to show you this. So I do have to explain this very carefully as I go along, because not to give you anybody out there the wrong idea of what's been presented here, okay? What the Lord is going to do here, he's going to allow my Father's Spirit into this room to say one sentence to me, that's all. And to me, that's going to show the mercy of God and the love of God is unfathomable. We have no idea the depths of mercy and the depths of love that the Lord has for us. And he's going to prove that point by allowing this thing to happen. Now, the reason why I do explain it properly is this. After all the encounter and everything, I remember the Lord saying to me, I was to tell people hugely that he is the master of the supernatural realm, and nobody goes there without his authority. And if an individual goes into that supernatural realm without his authority, he will leave you to Satan, and that's who you will be dealing with. And then you will have to be delivered through his priest to come back in relationship with him. So the reason why I'm saying that now is because the Lord is going to allow my Father's Spirit into that room, and it has absolutely nothing to do with me. I have not participated in this at all. I wouldn't have even known what was going on until I realized from the sentence what my dad's spirit was going to say. Now, I did not see him. I was aware that it was no body, it was my dad's spirit. I was made very aware of that. For some reason, I had that knowledge. Now, so my Father's Spirit then, allowed by the Lord, said to me, tell your mother I love her. And to me, that was just so profound and so extraordinary that I actually exclaimed out my mouth. And Frances Hogan to say, every time she hears me say that she screams laughing, because she said to me, you did not say that to the Lord. Tell me you did not say that to him. And which I did, okay? So when my Father's Spirit said, tell your mother I love her, I exclaimed, oh, so he's not in hell. So did I get that wrong? I was the very one who said he was going to hell, and that I was actually going to try and achieve that. And I got that totally wrong. So there in my mind was the mercy of God. And not only that, but the love of God. Because to me, I had forgiven the day before what was to me a monstrous man who had monstrous behavior towards me and my mum. And here I was fully convinced that my dad warranted hell, that there was no question about it. He would actually even go there straight away. No argument, no conversation, nothing. And I was totally wrong. Now, what I did realize then again was, and this came from this peace that saturated my interior. I had a certain revelations with it, you know, and I realized that this language I found within myself. The only reason, because I never heard my dad speak anything of love towards me or towards my mum, ever. And I said, in order for my dad to speak love, he had to be in the presence of love itself in order to speak them words. And that's exactly what did happen. So what had happened at that graveside was the significance of me bending down and putting my left hand on that grave. Because the Lord then would reveal to me after that encounter that this was the binding and the loosening that he was talking about. It wasn't just for the priesthood when he would explain to me in the scriptures, when he taught me the scriptures. Because he taught me scripture in 3 weeks, by the way, Bob, from Genesis to Revelation, on his lap mystically, you know. Yeah, it's just astounding. You know, that's how I could talk to the priest about Melchizedek. One who could barely read and write, sitting on the lap of the Lord, discussing Melchizedek. Just doesn't happen. You know? No. So the Lord assured me that when he said that, what you bind on earth is bound in heaven, what you loose on earth is loose in heaven. That on one level is the authority to the priest to bind and to loose. Okay? Even in the confessional, where the priest has the power to hold absolution if he sees that the soul is not repentant. So much so that it actually has an agenda behind the confession, that the priest can, you know, wait and tell you, no, come back when you have really that contrite heart and you are sincerely sorry. I see in you that you're not. You have something else going on here. Well, he has that power from the Lord to do that. Now, not only that, This is also the binding and the loosening between me and my dad. My dad went to purgatory when he died, and this act would release. And that's why the Lord allowed my father's spirit from purgatory that day to enter into that room, to tell me, he was in the position now to tell my mother that he loved her sincerely. And the reason why is because he had been taken out of purgatory, because now he could love. He could love God's way. Because as we learn in the divine will then, my father's void would have been filled of love. And now he could love. And now he could do nothing else but love. Because he was in the presence of love itself, living in the divine will in order to enter the kingdom. And that's how the Lord allowed him back. So, with that exclamation then, and I knew I had got it wrong, that was it then. The Lord took my dad off to eternity then. It was the only thing he allowed him to say. But he allowed it in for a bigger reason. And of course then, in my exclamation then, outward again, I said, well, that's just marvellous now, that is. So how am I supposed to relay that to my mother? I'm just supposed to go down there now and tell her, after 16 years of my dad passing, oh, by the way, ma'am, my dad told me to tell you he loves you. And by the way, he's been dead for the last 16 years, so I don't know how you're going to come to terms with that one. So, what did the Lord eloquently say? In his majestic way of dealing with creatures, if you will, that he knows need certain explanations that we can handle. He eloquently said to me, tell her it was in a dream. And I went, wow, that is just amazing. Imagine that. I said, I couldn't have said that better myself. Tell her it was in a dream. What a magnificent piece of majestic way of saying it to her. And the reason why the Lord would say that would be on two levels. Well, in the next 10 minutes, he is going to rebirth me, and he is going to take me into an ecstasy all to himself and take me out of this universe and give me infused knowledge, which would technically cover dream-like state, if you will. So, and also what he assured me of was, by me saying that to my mum in that way, she would be able to handle the revelation. Because if I was to go down there and say, listen, ma'am, I've just had a mystical encounter with the Lord there 24 hours ago, and he told me to tell you that my dad told me to tell you he loves you. So there you go. Work that one out. Well, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you, Bob. I think I'd be in an asylum. You know, if the Lord was to allow it to go down to that level. So obviously the Lord knew this was the way that my mother would be able to handle that revelation. Because this was the Lord allowing my dad not only to say that sentence to me, it was really to her. I mean, she was the wife. My dad didn't really need to say anything to me because I'm just going to have the encounter with the Lord and that would sort the whole thing. I had the understanding that when the Lord allowed my father's spirit in there, he was technically running that by me, allowed by the Lord, but specifically for my mum, you know. So when I did eventually go down there to tell her that after the encounter, you know, I did actually say to her, I said, Mum, I said, I've something to tell you. I said, I've just had a dream the other night, and I said, my father was in it. Now, she looked at me very strange with that rhetoric because she heard me say father, you know, and I wouldn't have called him that in all the years that we frequented the house together, you know. So the very fact that she could hear me say father sounded strange to her, you know. So I said to her anyway, I said, I dreamt that he told me to tell you something. And she said to me, really? And I said, yeah, he told me to tell you that he loves you. And then suddenly I seen this little sparkle in her eyes. Now remember, this is after the encounter. And I said to the Lord in my interior, would you look at this? Would you look at the little sparkle in her eyes there from that sentence? Yeah, she actually took it on board, you know. And I said, that's just amazing now, that is. And then my mum said what all Dublin women say when they're alarmed. okay, of that particular subject, she said to me, okay, that's enough now. We'll have enough of that. We won't talk that language anymore. Don't come out with anything like that ever again. And I said to her, no, I won't, no. And then I said to the Lord, message received. That's all. It's over now. And I went back to where I was living. Now that's fast forward after the encounter. Now reverse it back. And here's the actual encounter then. So I'm in the sitting room. The Lord has allowed my dad to say all this. He's gone off now into eternity. And next of all, I'm standing there, and here come the locutions. Now remember, it's locution 3 that I will know this is God. And not only that, but this is the Lord Jesus himself. Nobody else. But there will be a slight little twist to that. So, locution number 1. Now, I do believe it came obviously from the depths of the peace that had trickled down into my interior that he hit me with. Okay? Because in the depths of my being, I heard this loud locution, and it said, sit up on the settee. And now remember, I'm the only one in the house, and I exclaimed out and I said, what? Who said that? Sit up on the settee. Who said that? What was that? And then I stopped. Silence then for a few minutes, and then there was a second locution, much, much stronger than the first one, that said, sit up on the settee. And I went, no, couldn't be. No. And then I went, could it? And then I went, no, surely not. No, couldn't be me. Me, I said, no, couldn't be. Now, what I'm getting at there, Bob, is that somehow I sensed that this was divine, but I was trying to dismiss it. You know, in all my humility and the fright, you know, I was trying to dismiss it, you know. And I was saying, no, couldn't be. Don't even go there. Couldn't be. And then I said, me, no. Knowing where I was in the world, I was saying, no, couldn't be. Don't even go down that road. And then I said one word, Bob. I said, could it be? And I just left that sentence like that hanging. And here's the third locution that I would know it was God. When I said, could it be? A few minutes later, I heard one word so profound in the third locution that said, correct. And I went, oh my God, oh good Lord, no, surely not. And then I went, is it? Wow, this is amazing. It is. And then I went, are you sure? And I went, yes, it is. It has to be. It couldn't be anything else. You know, and I said, wow, this is crystal clear. This channel is crystal clear. If this is God, this is amazing. I'm talking to God. And then I went, not only that, I can actually feel him. I can sense him. You know, and I said, wow, this is amazing. And I said, well, there you go. Rice. Grand. Lovely. And I just stopped. And then I heard, go and get something holy. And I went, holy? I said, have you any idea the house that you're in? There's nobody holy in here. Never mind get anything holy. And he said to me, go down to the kitchen and you'll see a bag on the chair. Open the bag and there will be something holy in the bag. So I went down to the kitchen, and him being God, obviously was right. And there was a bag there. It wasn't my bag. It was one of the other two people that I was living with. And I opened the bag, and right on top of the bag, Bob, was a pair of brown Mount Carmel scapulars. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea where they came from because they weren't mine. And I was surprised if they were the other two's, because they were self-confessed pagans. What would they be doing with a Mount Carmel scapular? You know? And so I just took it out. I had a look at it and I said, he must mean this. And I went back into the sitting room, stood in the middle of the floor with the scapular in my hand. Now, I had no idea what they were at all. Fast forward a bit, I remember when I first told my testimony this, I remember a lady coming up and saying to me one time, she said to me, do you know where them scapulars came from, Greg? And I said, oh, okay, right. And she said, I reckon they came from one of their mothers put that in their bag. Because she said that's what mothers do. When their children move out, they put holy things in stockings, they put holy things in bags, they put holy things and blessed things all over the place. And I can guarantee, she said, that's how that brown scapular got into that bag. And I said, yeah, that's a fair enough theory, because I said, they weren't mine. And I was highly surprised that they would be the other two individuals either. But there they were in the bag. And obviously the Lord would have known they were blessed, because he was the one that said to me, go and get something holy. Now, the reason why he said that, Bob, now I know all this now, but then I didn't. But I can tell you now from hindsight and the encounter with the Lord and the communication with him, that now, not that I have myself on the same par, obviously, as the Virgin Mary, but when you parkour aside for a second, okay? One of my talks out there about the Virgin anyway is that this woman was so pristine clean, so immaculately conceived, that if she hadn't got every square inch of her nature holy in advance, past, present, and future, she would not be able to house what's about to come into her. Now, parkour there and look at why the Lord would say to me, go and get something holy. Because he wants that holy thing hanging out of me for when he enters me. Because if not, I would melt into the floor if there's not something substantial, holy, hanging out of me to absorb what he's about to do. That's why. Now, I didn't know that then. So here I am standing in the floor with the brown scapular in my hand. And then he said to me, put them on you. So I looked down and went, oh, this must be what he means. I opened it up and there was a big gaping hole, obviously, in the middle of it. And I just threw them over my head. And I went towards the mirror. And for some reason, I just found myself doing this with them, fixing them on me, And when I looked into the mirror, I actually seen that there was two pristine pictures, one of the Virgin and one of the Lord. And they were brand new. And they were so distinct that they looked actually lovely. Now, what I remembered first is that the Virgin Mary was on the front of my chest and the Lord himself was on the back. That's the way the scapulars landed when I put them on me. They landed that way. Now, in the encounter, they were turned around in the encounter, and I didn't do that. And then the Lord would explain why they were back to front, if you will. And what he explained was Mary was there. He came through his mother to do this encounter. He done the encounter himself, but she was there on the scene, which points to the fact then that in this divine will era of peace, that this is what it's all about, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And the language is that this era will consist of through her, in him, with us. That's how she's going to be crushing the head of the enemy in this era of peace. The Lord has given that accolade to the mother. And we are the offspring of Genesis 3:15. We are her children under her azure mantle, as she calls it. So she's on the scene all the time. Everything came through her in the Messiah. And everything else will continue to come through her. So she was there on the scene, and the Lord came through her in himself to rebirth me. That's why he said to me, my mother bowed down and she went to the back, and I came to the front, and I rebirthed you myself, from myself, straight into my divine will, there on the spot. And that's the next thing you're going to hear, how that actually took place. So when I had the scapulars on my position like that, he then said to me again, lie up on the settee. And then I went, oh, first two times it was sit up on the settee. Now I have to lie up. Something was going to happen. So I lay up on the settee. About 5 minutes passed and nothing happened. And I sat back up. And I swiveled back over and sat in the sitting position. And then, here we go. This is the actual encounter. So I'm primed for it all. I have the holiness hanging out of me. And here comes the Lord. So in the blink of an eye, I experienced this overwhelming coldness that entered the top of my head and went all the way down my body, very, very slow, inside and outside. And it was so cold that I knew it wasn't of the earth. This was a supernatural coldness. And it was so overwhelming that the only way I can describe it is that if you put 76,000 Siberians together on their coldest day, wouldn't come close to this cold. I've never experienced anything like it in my entire life. Now, the amazing thing about it was that I wasn't alarmed. I wasn't fearful. I wasn't frightened. But it was just overwhelmingly cold. But it just barely durable. And it went all the way down my body. And the more it was going down my body, the colder it was getting. So it was like I was being put into something very, very cold. And now what I didn't know then, what I know now, this is actually now what you described earlier on in the beginning of the interview. This is the actual dying of the self. This is the entire ego being taken down and you being purged on the spot of the blocks and the obstacles and the disorders that are there in opposition to God and stopping God having this relationship with you, all on your end of it, not his. You have the block. And this is what he is removing. But he's removing every block. That's the key. While you are still alive. So it's the killing of the self while you are still alive. Now he's going to prove the point that only the divinity can do this in the next movement. Well, it held the Lord's humanity up, didn't it? The divinity. So the divine will can do anything here. So this is what's happening. I'm being killed, if you will, and I'm about to be resurrected all in the one movement while I'm still alive. And this is just the remarkable power of God that he can actually do this. Rebirth you while you are still alive, not on the other side of eternity. This is the whole purging mechanism on the face of the earth here. Because this is why the Lord has done it so quick to me. If Picaretta is only a theory, well then it was only for her. And to achieve this then is only on the other side of eternity, which is not correct. Why did God go to the extreme of Calvary then, if it's all just for eternity? No. We're to be living the fruits of redemption, which is living in the crown of sanctification. That's the fruits of the labour. The Lord's labour was redeeming us, and we live in the fruits of that labour, which is living in his divine will as it was in the beginning. Now, in order to do that to its fullest, you have to be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect, only achieved in God's divine will, rebirthed by himself to bring you to that moment in union with God on the earth. That's what the divine will era of peace is all about. And it's going to be new, because here's the new. The old Greg is going to disappear in moments here, and the new resurrected one that was always in the mind of God from all eternity is going to appear in union with the Lord as Adam and Eve were in the beginning. And that's the reason why he done it very, very quick to me, to prove the point that it's not a theory, that it's factual, and God can only do it. And he done it to the most unlikeliest thing on the planet, as I do say, and the most unlearned man that I know of myself on the earth. That it's just It's impossible to get from where I was to where I am with the Lord now on any human level at all, any human power. As the priest said to me, you couldn't even be taught how to be on that road to union with God. It's just impossible. He said, what you know is not earthly given. It's divinely given. He said, your knowledge of God is not coming from an earthly learned position. It's coming from a divine encounter. That's the difference. And which then your whole nature would have to be rebirthed in order to understand me even telling you anything about the divine will, Bob, couldn't be from a learned position of my unlearnedness in the world. It's just impossible. Okay? So, this coldness then is representing that. So it goes all the way down my body. And as it was going down past my knees, it was so cold that I started to bend over with the actual coldness. And I literally thought that I was going to collapse on the floor. And then I said to myself, no, I don't think I'm going to collapse here. I think I'm going to die. I think that's what's happening here. Now, technically, I was right. I was being killed, if you will, in the supernatural sense of the word killing. See? So much so that one of these mystical men that was into the mystical end of things actually told me one time, he said, at that moment in time, that coldness represented exactly that. That if a coroner had have walked in at that moment in time, he would have actually pronounced me dead. That's what the coldness represented. It was the complete killing of the self. And it would be resurrected now in 10 seconds later in this way. So when that coldness went down into my feet, what I was aware of is that, and this is another thing that will happen in the union with the Lord in his divine will. When I couldn't hear the television that time, what was happening is that as soon as the Lord would enter the fray, okay, he was taking down my senses to the world first and rebirthing them in himself. So which meant then that my senses would be reborn in God the way they were in the beginning. They were tuned into him first, and then it would be balanced in the world. That's what he was doing. But I was just aware of the hearing sense because it was still so overwhelming knowing that I couldn't hear still, even in this counter. The locutions I could hear inside, they weren't audible on the outside. They were so loud on the inside because my hearing had been restored in the supernatural way it was always designed to be, to hear from God in your interior and to have that interior dialogue with him without even opening your mouth. And that's the way it's going to be in eternity, and that's the way it's going to be in this divine will era of peace. We will even be able to speak to the Lord without actually saying words. We will actually be able to speak with one another without saying a lot of words if we don't want to. We will be communicating of the one spirit, as it's called, when the Lord eloquently pointed that out to the Samaritan woman at the well when she asked him that. So you say, when she realized he was the Messiah, then she was a bit bold with him, and she said to him, well, you say, yeah, you worship on that mountain in Jerusalem. We say we worship in this one here. So who's right? Who's right and who's wrong? And he said, but woman, there's coming a time. Well, he meant this time. There's coming a time where there'll be nobody worshiping in that mountain and nobody worshiping on this mountain. We will all be worshiping in the one spirit to our Heavenly Father. The one will, in the one spirit. That's what he was talking about. This divine will era of peace. We will be able to communicate with one another like that. At times. Yeah. So, all my senses then were being rebirthed into himself. The one I was most aware of was the hearing. But after the encounter then, I would realize they're all rebirthed in him. Which means so profound, Bob, that I hear the Lord all the time. There is not 1 second of a day that I do not hear the Lord. Like Picaretta, he's in my interior. I have visions of him coming in, coming out, going out, coming in. All that language is all familiar to me. All that mystical sight, and the intellectual visions, as they're called as well, all normal to me since that encounter in 1998. It will not change. That's the union with the Lord. You learn even in Picaretta's writings that the Lord protects you so much in this union that he's a jealous God. He won't let you out of his sight for 1 minute in the relationship with him on all fronts. And that's retuning your senses into himself, So when you're fusing in the Lord then, and you're asking the Lord to come into your sight so that you may see in him and he see in you, and he see out through you and you see the other through them sight of the eyes of the Lord, that's all fusing in God. He done this to me in 20 seconds. And he rebirthed all them senses where he's looking out, he's hearing, he's talking, he's smelling, he's touching, his presence is there, all in me and I in him. It's the completion of John 14, I in you and you in me on the face of this earth. He always intended that from all eternity. He was always going to be incarnate in the human nature. That's what Satan said no to. He would not serve God in this human nature as well. And in my way of jokingly with the Lord would have said to Satan that day, well, you can close the door on your way out because it was never up for discussion. That's the way it is. Yeah. And those who wanted to acknowledge that with God, do that. And those who don't are demons and they don't want to. And that does be my talks out there as well on the Satan coming down into the garden and ruffling that up with the human will and that, So that's what the Lord is doing here. He's killing the senses, he's killing the ego, he's killing the blocks, he's killing the obstacles up against God, and then he's going to rebirth it. So when that coldness then enters my feet and it enters the last toe, I exclaimed, now not in a disorderly way or in a sinning way at all, but I just exclaimed from the top of my voice because it was so cold, Bob, that I actually exclaimed with alarm. Now, not terror or fear, just with slight alarm, I exclaimed, Jesus Christ, like that. And the moment I said that name, this is what happened. I even have the t-shirt for it. Okay? So, the Michelangelo artwork in the Vatican, where you see the two fingers. Yeah? One is our Heavenly Father, and one is Adam. And they're like this. Now, when they touch, you're going to get life. Okay? That's the whole idea of that. Well, in a couple of seconds here now, I am going to be made aware that the Lord himself is going to tip the side of my head with his index finger to rebirth me from himself. So when that cold entered my last toe, when I exclaimed the Lord's name, in the blink of an eye, the Lord himself made me aware, and you could see it in slow motion. He had his index finger like that, and he put it on the side of my face like that, and then took it away, and there was an explosion of heat. And I mean, so overwhelming that it took you out of your standing. It was so overwhelming and so soothing. I could have died on the spot willingly, and it wouldn't have fazed me. And this heat just went down like the cold, all the way down my body on the inside and on the outside. And every time it was going down my body, the more soothing it was getting, and the more warmth it was getting, and the more I was gone. I was leaving the earth at the same time. I knew I was just disappearing from that room. And it was so overwhelmingly beautiful heat that the only way I describe it is that if you put 76,000 suns together in the sky on the warmest day, wouldn't come close to this heat. It was so overwhelmingly soothing. And it went all the way down, and it stopped at my torso for about 10 seconds and then carried on down. And just as it went into my last toe, like the cold, it shot up to the top of my head on the inside and then shot down real fast and then just disappeared. And then I went into this ecstasy with the Lord. I just collapsed on that settee and I knew I was gone. I didn't know where I was gone. I just knew I had left the atmosphere. I was not in this sitting room anymore. And I don't know how long I was in that position for. But what I do remember was it was just ecstatic beyond belief. And after a while, whatever amount of time that was, I remember myself being sort of like lowered back down into that sitting room. And as I was being lowered back down into that sitting room, I kept exclaiming out of my mouth, no, no, I can't believe you're doing this. I said, I do not want to go anywhere near this sitting room. Just keep me wherever it is I am. I do not want to go back here. And I certainly do not want to talk to anybody after this. Now, I didn't know that the talking that I was talking about to the Lord was infused knowledge. He was actually infusing the conversation into me without me recognizing I was having a conversation. That's why I didn't want to come back down into this body and start talking to another human being after this experience. I just didn't want to. You know, and I kept saying to the Lord, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe that you're going to let me go back down into this, situation here and just leave it like that. And the more I was being lowered down, eventually then when I was lowered back down, let's say into my body, I exclaimed like what I call childlike language with the Lord. I went into this 4-year-old, let's say, disgust with him, and when I landed back down in my body on that settee, I just went and I said, yeah, well, whatever. And I just went like that. And I wouldn't even look, and I was in that child state of a 4-year-old, not talking to the parent because he didn't do what they wanted, And I stayed in that mode for a long, long time. And I knew at that moment in time, I wasn't quite well aware of what the magnitude of what had happened. I learned this along the way, what had happened when I met Frances Hogan. She recognized instantly what happened from the language that was coming out of my mouth. To me, it was normal. And she was actually teaching the divine will at the time. So she could hear all this Louisa Picaretta language coming out of my mouth. I mean, I was talking to Frances sort of like, immersed in the sea of love and immersed in the divine ocean and all that. All this language, I was talking to her as normal. So she recognized it instantly. She was the one that said to me, by the way, have you ever heard of anybody called Louisa Picaretta? And I said, who? And she said to me, well, obviously you haven't, But she realized what had happened to me. And she explained that she was teaching a thing called the divine will. And I was talking the same language. And she recognized the encounter. She knew what the cold was. She knew what the heat was. She knew all about infused knowledge. She knew about all locutions and all that. And all these intellectual visions, as they're called. She was familiar with all that. And she knew for me to be sitting there with that to me being normality, she would know what had happened. Her way of saying it to me was when I met her, after I think it was about 40 minutes into my testimony, she said to me, wow, he certainly picked you out of the crowd. That was the way she described it, And I said, yeah, I've never heard it put like that, So what had happened then, Bob, after that, is that he explained to me what happened. So the coldness was the dying of the self. The heat was the resurrection of the new. That was always there in God's mind. That was his rendition of you from all eternity, before the fall. There it was, resurrected. New creature in Christ, as Paul would say. That's exactly what it was. And then the infused knowledge to go with that was the knowledge about God. Once I had the knowledge about him, I knew who I was, and then I knew who mankind was. And then suddenly from this unlovable position, I could love. And not only that, I was in this love that the volumes talk about, where eventually in this union with the Lord, achieved by him in the divine will reigning on this earth in individuals, you will become two things, because you have to be familiar and similar with God. So therefore, you will become love itself, and you will become divine will. You won't only just have them.
Yes.
You will become them, you know. So therefore then, your love in loving God's way, you are going to love mankind the way the Heavenly Father loved the Lord and implanted it into you. That's why he said, I have loved you as the Father has loved me. And that's the way I want you to love the other. So in order for to love that way, it can only be done in God's divine will, reigning in you. To become this immutable figure where nothing will faze you, that no matter what comes your way, no matter who does what, you will absorb it for the Lord and you will love. And you will do nothing else but love. Because why? Because before Picaretta and before anybody living in the divine will, the old way of having all these virtues done was exercising something to exercise a virtue. So in other words, the way the Lord let me describe it is, so you want to exercise the virtue of love? Well, the Lord may need to let the gardener cut his grass on a Saturday afternoon, every Saturday, to rub you up the wrong way in order for you to exercise the virtue of love. He may have to do that. That's the old sackcloth and ashes, as the Lord calls it. Well, the new way of living in the divine will, that love will not be ventured into that way. It will actually become second nature, where that virtue will become a part of you. You will be love itself, and you will know how to love, and you will only know how to love. That's the key. So you will not be in the business of resenting or being bitter or reacting or this or that or any negativity outside the agape love of God. That's now all this before Picaretta was understood to be achieved in heaven. Well, the Our Father is saying, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that union that's there now is going to be here now. So as the Lord has a corridor from heaven to earth and vice versa, he's not blocked in any shape or form. He has the whole human will back into the divine will in heaven and on earth. So it's all re-entered the cosmic hymn of praise as it was meant to in the beginning. It's all back in harmony. And the creature was the last one, or the human being, or the soul, to be the last one that God would bring back in to harmonize the rest of it. And that's why when the Lord taught me all the scriptures and all that, he showed me as well as Romans 8:19 has been screaming at it for centuries. All of creation is waiting for the sons to be revealed.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's us. All of creation is waiting for it. Now, he assured me as well, the Lord, that if you're reading Our Lady from the Queen of the Divine Will, you will see that when Our Lady appeared on the earth, she was that much living in the divine will that all of creation recognized her, recognized the will as being the same, and they bowed down to her, and they recognized her. Well, that's not just for herself, and it wasn't just for Picaretta. That's what creation is waiting for, the rest of us, to be in this union with God and to harmonize the whole thing back as it was in the beginning. So everything is giving glory back to God on the way it was designed to do. And we become the speaking voice for creation. Okay? So that's what the Lord done to me, Bob, in 20 seconds. And that's the way I've been living my life since 1998. Never to, as I do say, whatever you do on me, Bob, I will love you to death. Yeah, nothing else. My weapon is love. And I remember the Lord saying to me that, the fruits of the labor in the redemption is that everything will end in love. Every single thing. Sin will not have the last word. It never did have the last word. The Lord even killed death. Death itself won't even have the last word. The last word will be love. Everything must end in love. And that's why the Lord has let his permissive will go down for certain things that may look tragic at the time, but you can be assured it will end in love. It will always end in the bigger picture, with God extracting the greater good from it, ending in love. And my whole life is a testimony of that. And the part with my dad's spirit being allowed to come into the sitting room is evidence of that. That even that ended in love. The monster that I knew as a father, who done nothing other than abuse me, all that ended in God's love. Somehow, mysteriously, mystically, in God's mysterious ways of doing things, it all ended in love. And when I just say it this way, it's so profound, Bob, that to think that the abusee co-redeemed the abuser because of love, it's just astounding, And even to come to that knowledge, Bob, on that level, no human being taught me that language. That's all divine language, and all that divine understanding, And I remember the Lord putting it this way, of where we're free today, living in his divine will. And he put it in this 3-pyramid way, if you will, where you have the law. Okay, you have the law, which is the 10 Commandments, and you have the Beatitudes in Matthew 5 on the Mount. And then in the middle there, driving the whole thing, is love. So he said to me, you say it this way, my child, because it makes perfect sense this way. That when you see the movements of love, in knowing no other than loving, this is how it works. So the law will tell you, thou shalt not. So wherever the thou shalt not is, you look at it now this way. Thou shalt not, and blessed are those who don't, because it's based in love. Now, no human being taught me that. The Lord himself taught me that. And I'll just say that once more again, because I've done that in a talk out there, and I've had people say to me, that is absolutely magnificent. That is so profound. I've never heard anything like that in my life. So listen to it again. Thou shalt not, and blessed are those who don't, because it's based in love. Powerful.
The heart of the law is love.
Exactly. That's it. Now you have it. It's all driven by love. The whole thing, from start to finish.
And it seems the key of what happened to you was forgiveness.
That's it. Forgiveness was the key. Yeah, that opened heaven. Yeah, it opened heaven. And it's actually in volume 36 what happened to me. And I'm going to tell you, the last part of the testimony is so profound. So I'm here now in this unique position with God. I'm rebirthed, living in his divine will, with all the infused knowledge that he wanted to give me, that a human being could be able to handle. Okay, now these two individuals that I lived with are going to come back into that house, and they are going to be looking at something extraordinary. Because when they left that morning, they seen the same Greg as they always seen. And when they're coming back later in the afternoon, they're going to see something that's just transformed, okay, into something that they wouldn't recognize but knew something happened. Now, so much so, Bob, that only God could pull this stunt, right? So the Lord knows that I am eventually going to have to talk to people. And he knows that the first two people I'm going to talk to are these two individuals coming back into this house. Now, what the Lord's going to do is, because the magnitude of the holiness in the act while just taking place, he's not going to allow me to have the very first conversation outside of himself with a human being to be trivial. He's going to keep the holiness going until he knows I will be talking to people then outside of this arena eventually. But for the moment, what the Lord is going to do is going to use one of these people with their free will to tell me what actually took place in that sitting room, and they weren't even there, and they wouldn't even know what they were talking about. Now, only God could pull that stunt. And this is the way he did it. So I'm standing in the hall after the encounter, and the hall door opens, and in they come. The two of them, in unison, one behind the other. And they stand in the hall, and I stand in the hall. And we're just looking at one another. Nobody's saying anything. Now, remember, the Lord is going to get one of them to tell me what happened. And then afterwards I would say to the Lord, well, I'm not surprised you were able to pull that, Lord, because you got a donkey to talk. So that's no problem. And if you can get that donkey to talk, you can get one of these donkeys to talk. No problem. Which he did. So here they are in unison, standing one in front of the other. And the person standing behind the first person puts out their head a bit and looks like this from the side, and has a look at me up and down, and then goes back in behind the other person and says nothing. And the Lord made me aware straight away. He said to me, now, my child, you've just witnessed John 15, the hostile world. And he said, it will be always like that until I eventually come at the end. He said, you will experience it all the time, but it's free will. And if that's what one wants to do, that's what one is allowed to do. So that was my introduction, first of all, to the hostile world, because this person would represent that in their disbelief. They had left that morning, seeing this individual, and totally transformed in the afternoon. They did not want to know what happened, and they weren't going to believe what was going to be said. That's why the Lord allowed it to happen, to say to me, this is the hostile world, but don't worry about it. You just keep going. And that was fine. So it's the first individual that the Lord is going to allow three things come out of this person's mouth. And the first thing that this person is going to say to me was, somebody was here. And I said, I thought they seen somebody. And I looked around like that. And I said, how do you know? And he said, how do I know? He said, have you seen yourself in the mirror? And I said, no. He said, well, you're not the same person that we left here this morning with. It's a totally different person. And then they said, can you not feel the heat that's coming from the house? And I said, no. And he said, but like, it's so overwhelming. Can you not feel it? And they knew that it wasn't the central heating in the house because we never turned it on. So it couldn't be that, you know? So he said, when I put the key in the door to open the door coming in, he said, when I opened the door, I had to stand back from the heat that was coming from the house. And he said, do you not feel that heat? And I said, no. Now, to me, Bob, that was me still in the throes of what had happened. And the heat and of the Lord's presence was still around in the house. This is what this fellow was experiencing, but he couldn't tell what it was, you know? So then the next thing is so profound. He would only say three things, and they will be explained to me by the Lord. And the first thing was, somebody was here. Now, the second profound thing he was going to say to me is, all of heaven is rejoicing today. This is from a pagan, Bob, that never read scripture in his life. And he said that sentence to me, all of heaven is rejoicing today. And I said to him, sorry? And he said to me, I've no idea what I'm talking about. And I said to him, where did you get that sentence from? And he said, I've no idea. I don't even know what I'm talking about. And that was the second thing he said. And the third thing he said to me was, you're going to alter history. And I said, sorry. And he said to me, I've no idea what I'm talking about. And I said, and where did you get that sentence from? He said, I've no idea. I haven't a clue what I'm talking about. So they were the three things that were said. Nothing else was spoken for the rest of that day. They went off somewhere and I stayed there for whatever amount of time. But then three things were said to me. Somebody was here, all of heaven is rejoicing, and you're going to alter history. Now, I asked the Lord then to explain them three things to me. Now, the third thing he would explain 26 years later, which is now. Because the Lord has assured me before, he's outside of time. 26 years is in the blink of an eye, where he's concerned, and he sees everything in the now. Everything is in act in the moment. So 26 years meant nothing to him. It did to me. Well, now it's this time. History is going to be altered by God's divine will. That's what it's going to be altered in. So suddenly now he has me going all over the world, telling this testimony and telling all about the divine will and trying to say to people from himself that this is real. This is not a theory. This will be reached, not may be reached. This will be reached on the earth. It was always in the original plan. It was in the original design for it to be done, that God will be reigning in the soul and he will be walking the planet in his divine will. That's the whole idea of it. He was going to do that from all eternity. That's what Satan said no to. He wouldn't be a part of this plan. So it's coming anyway. It's not going to be stopped. God is going to implement it. He's going to allow what he's going to allow in the world without getting into all the drama about that. There's nothing we can do about it. It's going to go down. He's going to bring this era of peace. Mary will have the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. She is the queen of the divine will. She's the queen of heaven, and she will be reigning in this era of peace. And she and the good Lord is sending me to Medjugorje to say, where are her children? She is screaming to the Lord, as she says in the volumes herself to Picaretta. And the Lord says himself, my mother is insistently praying to me every day, Son, bring your divine will to reign on this earth. And you have given me the mandate, she says, to dispose the children to you, so that you can come and reign in them and live in the divine will. And she's saying, where are my children? Where are they? She says, there's no point me having a kingdom to reign in without the children. Where are the children who are living the same will of their mother? Well, that's the $1 million question now on the earth. Where are they? Well, that's what the Lord now is sending me around the globe for, and to get that message out that Mary is looking for the children of this kingdom. And we're to hurry up because this reign is coming shortly, quicker than we think. See? So that's just a bit of prophecy there that the Lord decided to throw your way, Bob. Yeah. So I just try and get to the end of what I was talking about, where I'm trying to lead up to my mom. That's where I'm leading up to. Yeah. So but back to the guys in the house. So when the Lord then would say to me about the first two things, he's just explained to you there, Bob, what he meant by you're going to alter history. God's going to alter history, but he has a conduit here to go around the planet to get this out to the world, that this is what the Lord wants. And he did give me 3 women to do it with, that are going around with me. They're the 3 women of the team. And we are going around doing that. And so that was the third thing explained. But the first 2 things, the Lord said to me, the first thing that was said to you was, somebody was here. And he said to me, correct, you know I was that body. Now what he meant there was, he was there in body, mind and spirit, not just in spirit. He was physically there in the flesh, in body as well. And he said to me, and you know that. And I said, I do, Lord. Well, he said, I was that body that was here. And he said, I came and left the 99 in the sheepfold to get that one lost sheep, which was you, and bring you back into the sheepfold. Now, what he meant by that was he would rebirth me in this relationship that I was always supposed to have with him, in the beginning. And then bringing me back into the sheepfold, he would bring me back into the Catholic Church, and he would say to me, "This is my church." And I would exclaim from the relationship, "Obviously, how could it not be?" Now, also along with that, in order for him to bring me back into a communication and relationship with Mary, who I never knew, would have never prayed to at all he had to say to me was 6 words. And then, because of himself, I would be back in relationship with Mary, knowing who she was. And the 6 words that the Lord only had to speak to me to get this back was these 6 words. He said to me, "You know, Mary is your mother." That's all he had to say to me. And I exclaimed to him, "Obviously, how could she not be?" It was so obvious because of the relationship with himself and in the union with him that it made perfect sense that she would be my mother. And my earthly mother was still alive at the time. And I still had no problem in that revelation coming to me as if it was normal, which it is. She is my mother, and now she's looking for the rest of the children to be rebirthed into the divine will here. So it's the second thing that was said to me. When the Lord said to me, what was said was, "All of heaven is rejoicing today." He said that has 3 layers to it. And it's the 3rd layer that's the most important. And that's the one that's in the volumes. It's in volume 36, Bob. This is the one that's in the volume, the 3rd level. So on the 1st level of that sentence, all of heaven is rejoicing today. Remember, this is a pagan who quoted that. Well, the Lord said, "I am all of heaven, and I was here today, and I was rejoicing to get this one lost sheep back into the sheepfold and back in union with me." Now, what he meant by his name, he was using his name Yahweh by saying, "I am all of heaven." He could have said anything. He could have said, "I was here. That's right. This right. That right." He said, "No, I am all of heaven, and I was here." So he's pronouncing himself who he was. Okay? Now, layer number 2, he said, "Heaven rejoices over one repentant sinner." And he said to me, "Self-explanatory?" And I said to him, "Obviously, Lord, that one sinner was me." Now, this is the one that's in the volumes, from volume 36. Layer number 3, the Lord said to me, "When all of heaven sees that the Lord himself is going to leave it and come to this earth to possess a soul, which means marrying them and bringing them back into this union with him in the wills, all of heaven rejoices. And all benefit from the wedding, and all celebrate in heaven and earth the marriage." Now, no human being told me that, and that actually is theoretically correct. And that's the depth of the infused knowledge that I'm talking about. Nothing that I know of God has been taught to me by a human being, because I was expelled from school. I had no religion basement. As the priest said to me, "You wouldn't even have known how to be on the road to union with God. You didn't even have a prayer life. You didn't even know a formal prayer. You absolutely knew nothing." And that's obviously where God wanted you to be, to prove to the world that this is coming. This is going to happen. And God is going to achieve it in his children, as he always wanted from eternity. So, just to probably be finished with you then, Bob, where my mum is concerned. So, it comes to my mum's passing. And remember, the Lord did say to me not to tell her that he wanted to tell her.
Yes.
Well, the moment that my mum was passing, I was at our bedside when she was passing, and there would be a few family members there. I did have two brothers living at the time, and they were about 50 odd years of age at the time. Now, the Lord is going to show me two profound things at my mum's passing of our deathbed. He's going to show me glory and tragedy, all in the one day. So I knew that the Lord was going to take my mum's soul. He told me that he wouldn't take her until I got there. I would witness it. He would hold it off till I got there, which he did. And I sat down at the end of my mum's bed, and my mum went unconscious. She never regained conscious after that, and she passed away. But before she passed away, I was sitting in a chair under a crucifix, and I was the only one that was sitting there. There was about 12 people in that room, including my two brothers, and the Lord kept this seat empty. And I was the only one to sit in it, and I was the only one under the crucifix of the Lord. And I could see my mum through my two brothers, through their elbows. And I just watched her, and the Lord told me then in the blink of an eye, he said, I'm going to take her soul now, and he did. And all I can say is that the power of God taking a soul from a body is just astronomical. It's no wonder he's called the Almighty. It's just so profound. I can imagine what it's like when he's infusing the soul into the body from conception. It must be just spectacular if you were to be able to see it. If you can see him, on my mum's deathbed passing, the power of him just taking it from her. And our body just deflated in the bed, as if it was nothing, And this is the tragedy then first that I would experience. My two brothers were in their 50s, and they screamed crying like 7-year-old children. They just lost it emotionally. They couldn't get it together. I was the only one in that room who knew what had gone on. I had this relationship with the Lord in his divine will. I knew my mum was gone straight to heaven, that there was no question about it, no problem. And there was family members who didn't walk with the Lord. They weren't on that path. And here they were, gone into this emotional turmoil and could not hack it and couldn't handle it. And then the Lord pointed out to me about that scripture, let the dead bury the dead. I knew then what he meant. He meant this different walk with him. They weren't there where I was. This was dead in the dead spiritual sense of the word, going to bury the dead. That's what he meant. I was on this different par with the Lord, where I understood that nothing was lost. Everything ends up in love, in God. My brothers and family members weren't there at that depth of knowledge. They weren't even there at that depth of relationship with God. And how could I even tell them? They would think I was stark raving mad from where they were in their unspiritual state with God, which wouldn't be condemned by the Lord. I certainly wouldn't be condemned by me. I understood through compassion and love for them that they didn't know what I knew, And so in that way then, the Lord showed me this tragedy, and he said it in this way. And I quote from him. He said it in this way. My mum has just passed. He'd taken her soul. My two brothers went into this uncontrollable condition of grief. And the Lord then said to me in my terror, and I quote him, he said it to me in this way. He said to me, now, my child, he said, these people need this woman to wake up, because there is unfinished business, and she's not going to wake up. I have taken her soul, and the window of opportunity has come and gone. And that's the tragedy of the Lord saying to you, you need to do something before the sun goes down. That's before the sun goes down can mean you can take something so extreme and not do it for 40 years, and then suddenly the window of opportunity closes and you lose that opportunity to do it. That's the point the Lord was making to me. But then there was a long pause. And then he said to me, but I will revisit this with your brothers, and I will give them another opportunity. But this time it will be down a different road. Meaning, like, my mum will have passed. They won't be able to go to her physically, but they'll have to do it with the Lord anyway. And he will revisit the scene, so in order for to get them into the kingdom of the divine will as well. So in other words, God doesn't abandon anybody. He does close windows of opportunities for his mystical way of doing things, but he will revisit all the time. He will always give you the opportunity to come back to him in ways that are so profound from him that he's trying to get you to notice them in life, that this is what he's trying to do, you know? So that was the tragedy level that he showed me. Now here's the glory level. So I left my brothers there. We parted. I tried to go out of the hospital, and I went towards the front door. And as I was going towards the front door, I found myself leaning to the left, and I put myself back and carried on. And the second time I felt myself leaning to the left. And this time when I looked down, I was beside a flight of stairs, a marble set of stairs. And I said to the Lord, do you want me to go up here? Is that why you're veering me to the left? And he said, I do. Go up these stairs, up another small flight of stairs, and sit on the landing. That's what he said. So I went up and I sat on the marble landing. And then he made me aware that 6 minutes prior to that, he had taken my mum's soul, and I was sitting over her body in the ward. I was sitting directly on the landing, which was directly over the ward where her body was still lying, and I was directly over her. And then he told me to look down the stairs, at the bottom of the stairs. Now, he kept everybody out of that area. You could hear a pin drop. There was no nurses, there was no janitor, there was no traffic at all in that area. It was just total silence. And just as he allowed my father's spirit to enter the sitting room in the start of the interview when I said it here, he's now going to allow my mother's spirit to be at the end of the stairs, to say one sentence to me also. And again, I didn't see her body. She'd no body, but I was aware that her spirit was at the end of the stairs. And she said to me, I know everything. That's what she said. And then she disappeared. Now, what did she know? I didn't tell her anything. This is another way of the Lord saying that he is in complete control. So he had said to me all them years prior to that, do not tell your mother that you had this encounter. I want to tell her. That's exactly what she was saying to me when she said, I know everything. Now, what was it she knew? God would tell me what she knew. So I quote him. This is what he told me. He told my mom. So when we go over to eternity, when we pass away over to eternity, the Lord said to me one time, there is no mathematical equation to tell you the speed of what you will be standing in front of him when you pass. You are instantly there. You hardly get the strength to close your eyes when you are standing in front of the Lord himself to have that conversation. And the conversation is all about him trying to get you into the kingdom, to live in his divine will in the kingdom. So when my mom's spirit or soul was standing in front of him, having that conversation, this is what the Lord said to my mom, and he gave her the cherry on the cake in these words. And I quote the Lord, he said to her, the child that I have allowed you bear has now been rebirthed from my womb straight into my divine will on this earth to do a particular job for me. And it's not finished. And that's what she was saying. I know everything. Amazing.
It's extraordinary,
Yeah.
extraordinary testimony. So powerful, and yet it makes so much sense as well.
Mm.
I made some notes while you were talking.
Nice.
Anything that I would say, I think, would be superfluous.
Wow.
It's very, it makes so much sense how you describe it. And especially the way you tied it into the divine will, the experience, the testimony, and that it is really part of the divine will, is all tied together in one. It's just tremendous. And I can't thank you enough for sharing it with my audience.
No, my pleasure, Bob. Absolutely profound. I love telling the testimony and talking about the divine will at every opportune moment, you know, and it's a pleasure. And even my team here and nodding away at that, saying that, you know, we met you on a Zoom in Garabandal. They all have their thumbs up behind the screen, you know, saying, yeah, we remember having the conversation with you when we were in Garabandal. And it's an absolute pleasure, Bob, to know you and to meet you and to tell my testimony to you personally. Thanks very much for that opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor. And I want to thank the team as well, because
Yeah.
I know that they're being very helpful in doing this. They're instrumental in getting this message across and getting this very important testimony out to the world.
To the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
And I want to thank my audience for joining. And as always, God bless.
God bless, Bob. Thank you very much.